Great. Welcome, everybody, to a webinar hosted by Rise Michigan, Prosperous Detroit, and Global Detroit. And really excited to have you to talk about some new research and a report released called The Power of Trusted Connectors in Micro Enterprise Development. This is a work product of Global Detroit and the Build from Within Alliance with financial backing from the New Economy Initiative. My name is Steve Tabachman. I'm one of the authors of the report and the executive director at Global Detroit. We are going to try and get out of here on time for viewing of the total eclipse. And I'd like to introduce our two MCs today, and I'll introduce them in reverse order. So Paul Jones is the executive director of Prosperous Detroit, and he comes to that position after working at the New Economy Initiative and his own background in starting small businesses. He's a Detroit native, and Paul, in his role at Prosperous Detroit, also sort of leads the Rise Michigan Coalition, which he'll tell you a little bit more about, which is a statewide coalition to help expand access to small business opportunities for underserved communities. Prosperous, if you don't know, is a micro enterprise training development program that works in Southeast Michigan. And our second MC is Dr. Elena Jackson, who is the managing director at Global Detroit, also a Detroit native, who comes with incredible experience in cooperative enterprises, micro enterprise development, community development, and was a Detroit Revitalization Fellow that brought her back to our city. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Dr. Jackson.
Thanks, Steve. We have a really packed agenda today of a lot of good information. So just going to run you through the agenda really quickly. Could you go to the next slide? So we're going to have three panel discussions today. The first focusing on what is a trusted connector. The second focusing on the power of trusted connectors in micro enterprise development and what we learned from this research. The third panel will focus on how trusted connectors can expand inclusion in our small business support ecosystem. We'll have a little time for Q&A. There are a few poll questions we have for you all, and then we'll release you to go enjoy the eclipse. So, as Steve mentioned, I am Dr. Elena Jackson, the Managing Director of Global Detroit, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar to launch our latest joint research on trusted connectors. A little bit about Global Detroit. We are a regional community and economic development organization. We believe that by intentionally including immigrants in our community and economic development strategies, we will spark growth, revitalization, and sustained prosperity in Detroit and throughout Michigan. At Global Detroit, we are trusted connectors, architects of ideas, and change agents, working to build a high-growth, prosperous, and inclusive regional and statewide economy. After more than a decade of national work, Global Detroit is happy to announce that we're launching ePluribus, a new national initiative that is committed to broadening and deepening the field of state and local immigrant inclusive economic development across the country through projects like this. But we didn't do this work alone. The Build from Within Alliance is a national network of community development organizations supporting local entrepreneurship in neighborhoods across the country. It works in communities that have experienced both visible and invisible signs of systemic disinvestment resulting from centuries of racist practices and policies. Build from Within Alliance members work to reverse the systemic disinvestment by expanding the community resources and opportunities required to support low-income resident entrepreneurs as drivers of economic and social change. The Build from Within Alliance is an impactful innovator around micro-enterprise development in ways that reach the most underserved communities, and so we were honored to partner with them on this project. I've mentioned the phrase trusted connectors a few times, and we're here today to expand our understanding of just what that means. The New Economy Initiative defines trusted connectors as organizations that maintain trusted relationships with small businesses through community-based engagement while focusing on specific geographies, population segments, and/or industry sectors. Trusted connectors typically refer small business owners to other resources within the ecosystem, but sometimes also provide their own practical assistance services. The report we're featuring in today's webinar reflects the collaborative efforts of Global Detroit and the Build from Within Alliance and attempts to advance the concept that small business grants, loans, and technical assistance programs need to invest in community partners with authentic and trusted relationships if we are serious about building equity and inclusion into our outcomes and impact. Through the generous support of the New Economy Initiative, as Steve mentioned, and the Trusted Connectors Research Report, we've now documented this practice and its growth nationally, as well as developed helpful tools to assist small business support organizations, microloan funds, funders, economic development agencies, and others in deploying Trusted Connectors. We're proud to say that this is the first research or report on this topic or of its kind. While Trusted Connectors have always existed, this is a relatively new endeavor to conduct an exploratory analysis of their use. The goals of the research report are to increase the use of Trusted Connectors and make a case for funding Trusted Connectors and their work, and for building the deployment of Trusted Connectors into budgets, as well as building their connectivity and engagement work into project and funding timelines, but also to potentially develop a coalition or network of Trusted Connector programs nationally, and finally, to spark additional research into Trusted Connectors. So now I'd like to introduce my fellow partner in crime, my fellow MC, Paul Jones, the CEO of ProsperUs Detroit, and also the chair of the Roundtable for Inclusive Support of Entrepreneurship Michigan Coalition, also known as RISE. Paul?
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. I really appreciate you grounding and contextualizing this discussion, which we are really excited about having. I'd like to introduce ProsperUs and illustrate how we are, our foundation is also grounded in the Trusted Connector model. ProsperUs is a Black-led CDFI hyper-focused on the empowerment of marginalized, resource-stressed business owners and coming from resource-stressed communities in and around Metro Detroit. Our mission extends beyond providing capital. We are differentiated through our deep-seated engagement in the communities we serve, striving to meet entrepreneurs where they are, culturally, physically, and along their unique business trajectories. This commitment was shaped and exemplified through our longstanding partnership with Global Detroit, which originated at our inception. This collaboration has been pivotal in employing the Trusted Connector model to offer competent support to marginalized communities, including immigrant communities that are often overlooked by the traditional support systems. Our framework is inspired by and shaped by the Neighborhood Business Center, which is located in the Twin Cities. And this model highlights the importance of a community-driven approach. This influence has led us to the creation. This influence led to the creation of the Built from Within Alliance, which Dr. Jackson discussed, which the Built from Within Alliance now has 16 partner organizations that spans across the nation, as far north as Anchorage, Alaska, and as far south as Miami, Florida. So truly a national network. Our partnership with Global Detroit and the Trusted Connector model continues to be the cornerstone for the strategy of ProsperUs. The insights gained from this collaboration have been instrumental in shaping the direction and will further shape how we support businesses around the state. And one of the new initiatives that Dr. Jackson discussed, as well as Steve discussed, was our involvement and leadership at the RISE Alliance. With the support of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, MEDC, we and the Entrepreneur Support Grant, we were able to convene and share some of the best practices with 6 other organizations around the state that focus on nurturing emerging businesses from their local communities. And through this network, we're excited about launching the Trusted Connector model, getting best practices, and continuing to serve marginalized business owners across the state. Some of our partner organizations include the Grand Rapids area Black businesses, the Grand Rapids Urban League, 100,000 Ideals in Flint, the Grand Rapids Chamber, the Michigan Black Business Alliance, and of course, our good friends, Global Detroit. Again, we are extremely excited about the launch of this report. We understand that the Trusted Connected model paves the way for a more inclusive and equitable future for small businesses in Michigan and beyond. As we move forward to deepen our impact and inspire change across the state, proving that when communities come together, prosperity follows for everyone involved. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Jackson so we can continue to kick off this amazing initiative. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I'd like to now introduce Tarek Thanik. He is actually Global Detroit's Director of Opportunity Neighborhoods, focusing on community and economic development initiatives. Tarek has 10 years of emergency management, policy analysis, and government engagement experience at NGOs. We're really lucky to have him on our team and excited for him to be our first moderator today. He will moderate our first panel, which will focus on what is a trusted connector and get us grounded in that as a group. Tarek?
Oh, thank you so much, Elena. Appreciate that. I am very excited for this opportunity to introduce to you three of the finest community leaders in Metro Detroit. On the panelists today, we have Raquel Garcia, Executive Director of Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision. Raquel lives and works in Southwest Detroit. Her and her team works on emission reduction and decarbonization projects in Southwest Detroit. She's originally from Texas and moved to Detroit in 1992 and has been an active neighbor who's passionate about neighborhood inclusion and civic engagement. Second, we have Abdul Mohit. He's an Associate Director of District Business Liaison with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, DEGC. Mohit is a D3 district, and he enjoys working and advocating for our small businesses in the city. He is passionate about serving the small business by hand-holding them when they are in need of something with the city services or any business associate programs in the area. And lastly, my dear friends, Gracie Xavier, she's the Executive Director of the Artillery. Gracie is a multi-talented, passionate professional with a passion for economic development, social entrepreneurship, and the arts. As a visionary and founder and the president of the Artillery, she channels her expertise as a catalyst for change and a bridge builder to uplift immigrant women and global artists in Detroit. Gracie provides essential support, resources, and training to empower these individuals to maximize their creative talent for both social and economic development. Before that, Gracie excelled as a Director of Economic Development and Corporate Strategy and served as the Chief Talent Strategist Consultant at Global Detroit. Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited for this opportunity. These three individuals have helped not only just Global Detroit grow and establish trusted relations with the community, but helped many organizations as well. Thank you all for joining us. I'm very excited. Let me start the discussion by asking Raquel about how Global Detroit started as a trusted connector.
How much time do I have, first of all? So I'll when I look back and I think about how this developed, I think there was already a vision and a recognition that all of the resources that were happening in Detroit were not reaching the community, right? And I think I remember doing a lot of rights work. I was doing a lot of immigrants' rights work in Southwest Detroit, and I had already in my body had realized like that many people we were working on rights, but we're still being left out of the economic kind of all of the resources that were happening in Detroit at the time. And that's when Steve said, there's an opening at Global Detroit, you should come over. And but I don't think we could have known just all of what was going to happen, right? So I think how did it happen? I think first of all, we were already working on this very similar model with land bank homes, because something I will name is, we recognize that institutional racism was not allowing a lot of people in anywhere. If you're of color, if you're an immigrant, if you, if you're not part of the system and understand how it works, like it's just going to leave you behind. And so, around that time, all of our outreach, I think, was getting noticed. And James Fegan from NEI Ideas reached out in 2015 and asked us to go and knock on doors and, bring people in. And yeah, knock on doors, talk to people, let them know what was happening. And we increased it by 350% from 6 to 21. And it just really, yeah, it just kind of burst open around that time.
Well, thank you. This is very important, especially about the history of it and where Global Detroit started. Through your experience, can you tell us a little bit more about one of those award winners that you've engaged, some of the story behind some of the relationship that you've built?
Right. So, just thinking back about, being a trusted connector is, just knocking on lots of doors, going to a lot of places, meeting a lot of people, asking a lot of questions. We found Salvador Enriquez from Guadalajara. I can't even say it. It's a meat market. I'm a little nervous, so my tongue's all tied up. And I remember that he had a dream. He was like, I would love to apply. I don't know how to apply. And he was actually sharing space in another market and another restaurant store market. And he was saying, I really want to do this. I don't know how to do this. I want to branch out. I want my own space. And so I think it took multiple visits and developing a relationship. And there was a lot of circumstances. I used to use the word barriers, but I don't think life circumstances are barriers. Or, something happens, you're not able to get the lending in that moment, or you have to take all your resources and fix your house or what, so it's just whatever was occurring in his life. And then he applied. We applied with him. We applied and, we took everything in Spanish and translated it into English and helped him kind of really work on his story. If you go back in time, he'll say, oh, I want to have a meat market. And it's like, no, you are bringing a lot of cultural information from the region of Mexico that you're from. He would work with pepper vendors. And then, if you ever have enchiladas or mole, like there's like 150 different kinds of mixes. And he could tell you all of this. And so it's not just you sell meat. No, it's very complicated and special. You represent this really important resource in the community. And we want to, and then you become really invested in their dream, right? Like their dream becomes your dream. And so, so we were working with him and helped him apply, and he was one of the winners.
Thank you. That's kind of one of those stories that helps us passion and fuel us to move forwards. Mohit, did you have the same experience as a trusted connector?
Yes, I had. Thank you, Tariq. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak on this panel today. So definitely, yeah. So Raquel, my mentor, is here. Everything that I have learned, I would say, in the economic development work, that started with Raquel. Also with Global Detroit, because I had the opportunity to meet two great people. Sloan Herrick, Steve Tobacman, and I believe Sloan is on the call. She's listening. So it's really, so Raquel really helped me, the work that she was doing in Southwest Detroit. They wanted to replicate the same work in Banglatown. They were looking for a fresh set of eyes. They're looking for someone who could speak the language, who could feel the emotion, sentiment. And luckily that was me. So I was able to start my economic development journey, career, from the Banglatown area. And so Raquel helped me to come down and meet businesses, the lesson that she learned that really helped me. So she helped me learn all this. And so one of the business that I could remember, Rizal Karim, he's the owner of Everyday Super Discounts. He is one of the business owners that received the funding. So grants versus loan, something is still people are not sure about. A lot of them, like they think, there is nothing free, especially people in our community. They don't think there is anything free that they don't pay back. So we literally we had to go down and meet businesses, sit down with them. You won't believe, Tariq, we had to sit down with businesses for hours, hand translate the application that we had from any ideas. I still have a couple of them. I saved it. That I have Raquel's handwriting on that. I still have those applications. We did submit the digital copy. It's not that I didn't submit it, but I have the copy. Um, so this business was not first ready to apply. We have another colleague, Aladdin Alashmi, who is an American Yemeni American person. So he first touched him, and then he said, "Hey, Mohit, I think you should go and meet him, talk to him, and it looks like he needs help." So I went there. I sat down with him. I already knew him from the community. We went over the application, and he took some time, maybe I think 3-4 days. He said, "I'll think about it," and then I went again. So at least 3 visits. We needed to make to have them. Feel convinced and feel that trust is there. And when so that really helps. So trusted connector is really key to build relationship, and without those trusted connectors, it's really hard to work in immigrant communities where we know that for sure they need help, they need support, and the support is there. What Raquel used to say, we are resource rich but connection poor. We have to build this connection, so we need that. And so yeah.
No, it's very exciting, but also put some light on the challenges that entrepreneurs are facing. As a trusted connector, how do you feel or think that the work has influenced the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation and your position?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tarek. It really did. My current position with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, so that stemmed from the work that I have done with Global Detroit. We built many connections with the city. We had to do the work that we did in the neighborhood and economic development work in Bangalore. We had to work with the district managers from the mayor's office. We had to work with different other agencies, the Vistas, the GSD crews. We did cleanups, Motor City makeover, and all this stuff. We also worked with DEGC when they wanted to promote the Motor City match to get businesses funding as well, right after any ideas. So it was really they saw that it's needed, and we have been I think at the DEGC as well, we have been mindful about having people who speak the language in the community, in the commercial corridor where we are meeting businesses and talking to them. I can give you the example here. So I'm working in the District 3. We have a lot of Arabic speakers. We have Bengali speakers, Indian and Pakistani as well. So I speak 4 different languages. So that really helped to build that connections. And we have our District 6 business liaison in Southwest Detroit. Right now our DBL is Miss Nancy Cepeda. So we always wanted to make sure that we have a DBL who speak the language, so they can have a connection within and build off of that. It's really so when you first see someone in your face who is from your community, so that's half the job done. Like 50% work is done. Okay, the first thing is, okay, that's my person. So at least so there are a lot of barriers, as a person, as a especially people who are coming up from overseas. So there are a lot of barriers they will have to go through, a lot of challenges they'll have to go through, and one of them is having that trust and especially in the first meeting, And then we have another DBL, Mr. Sami El Hadi. He is in District 7, so he speaks Arabic. And so he's also from that community. So it's really it's important to have trusted connectors. And I am really great that the organizations like DGC and others really feel that, and they understand it, and that's what they're doing. So it's really important. And I'm glad that we are able to continue this work.
Yeah, you bring a good point, and I want to ask Gracie. Since I met you in 2021, you've been an advocate and for an immigrants, inclusive and women inclusion as well in the entrepreneurship. And one of my greatest memories is just like sitting in a room, learning a lot from like the passion that you have. Like, oh, look at this whole new sector communities that have been neglected and nobody have overlooked. In your opinion, how trusted connectors can be used to connect with communities that are often overlooked?
I think one of the best ways I always think about it for me is the fact that I'm new in predominantly every community that I've lived in. Detroit is my sixth community, and I was fortunate and blessed to move to Detroit as part of the Detroit Revitalization Fellows Program, and they leverage their network to help me build connection and social capital. And I'm thinking of an immigrant or anybody that is new to a city, an environment, facing some of the challenges of either language, culture, all of those barriers, how important it is to have someone that you can trust, that can provide you with the social capital, that can do the vetting for you, and that can connect you to resources. And so when Global Detroit coined Trusted Connectors, I would like to credit Beth for that in regards to some of the work we were doing during the study in Banglatown. It's basically putting some of basic community engagement 101 in one, coining it to two words, because I think, especially with the community of women that I work with, some of the homes that I go to, and many people are like, how do you have so many Yemeni engagement? How do you have a lot of Bangladeshi, West African? And it's because you are doing the legwork to meet people where they are. And I think Raquel hones on that, Abdul, Elena, Steve, is like, I think that's what Trusted Connectors are doing. They have the ability to go meet the people, if it's at their home, if it's at the church, if it's at their business, because it is important, because I may not know the community well enough to be able to traverse or know exactly where I need to go. So if someone comes with me, it gives me time to build the trust that they're truly invested in me. And so that was very important to me. And so the work we were doing in at Global Detroit, this feels like a reunion. It's nice to see everybody. Is the fact that we were doing Main Street work, small business work, but we weren't connecting to some of the women in the community that probably have some great ideas, but were isolated due to language, culture, or transportation, right? And so willing to go ahead and go meet someone for a tea at their home so you can really learn what challenges they're facing. And I'm an artist. Everyone knows that community art is my background. So having the opportunity, Global Detroit having faith in us to pilot a project of leveraging the arts to connect to folks was very important, because we all know everyone connects to music, culture, food. They may seem basic, but I think at the end it leads to finding out what exactly is the need of the community so we can better serve them, to really connect them to equity and inclusive economic opportunities. And I think that's what we did with Common Bond, and it gave us an opportunity to connect with women in the community that we normally would not connect with. And so when we work with INA Events and Decor, or we work with East Davison Village, yes, it was the arts that we were using, but then we found out that they had bigger goals. And so we can leverage our own social capital, our own network, and our own resources to help them build either the confidence or the connection so they can leverage opportunities for themselves. So I think Trusted Connectors are essential to the work that we do. And I think when I heard if you're doing great community work, you need Trusted Connectors as part of that equation. So Ina Events and Decor was one of the ladies who attended our textile classes, basic textile classes, but that's not really what they were interested in. But for the first time, I think they had an opportunity to let somebody know what they really wanted to work with. And we were then able to connect them to our other partners in the community, like ProsperUs, like the Detroit Development Fund, or whoever they needed, so they can get the resources, so they can get their event planning business up and running.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think one of the things we've learned is meeting people where they are. I think that is kind of something that we really need to think about. I also want to share like a common thing between common thing between those three individuals. We call them the unofficial mayors because wherever you go, yeah, I know Raquel, I know Gracie, I know Mohit, everybody knows them. And it's always just exciting to have that familiar face when you meet with new entrepreneurs, with new community members to help them broadcast some of the resources that are out there. I just want to say thank you all for your time. I appreciate your hard work. You're making our communities a lot better. I personally learned a lot from each one of you. You've left a huge gap at Global Detroit that was kind of there trying to fail. But I want to really say thank you so much. And passing it back to Elena for the second panel.
Thanks, Tarek. That was a great panel. And thank you to the first round of panelists. I can say that I have largely benefited from the work that you all have done. Your work comes before me now that I'm on the Global Detroit team, and I am forever referencing your past efforts. Raquel, I referenced some of your work the other day in working with, talking to a funder, saying I wanted to continue some of the home ownership work that you began. And so I'm appreciative and have personally and professionally benefited from the original investments you all have made into this work. So next, I'd like to introduce Noor Edie and Steve Tabachman. Noor is the daughter of an immigrant small business owner and led the research for the Trusted Connector research project. And she's now a special projects manager with Global Detroit. We're excited to have her on board and to see where this new relationship is going to take us with possibly, more research opportunities. Who knows? Steve is the executive director of Global Detroit, as we all know, and he is also Global Detroit's founding director. So he actually has led the growth of the organization, taking it from an 18-month research and engagement process to what is now a thriving nonprofit organization regarded as a national leader in advancing immigrant inclusive economic development. On a personal note, you never know what's going to happen when you start working with somebody who was the founder of an organization. What I can say is Steve has made great space for partnership and thought partnership in particular for me in this space. And so it's a pleasure to work with somebody who so very deeply believes in the mission of the work and doesn't let that get above his ego. I learn something from him every day. And to a researcher, that's a pretty big deal. So Noor and Steve are going to discuss what we learned from the research, and we'll begin with Steve. Steve, what were some of the major findings from this research effort?
Well, thanks, Elena. And I just really want to thank everyone who's participating in this webinar, Noor especially for the hard work she did originally as a grad student and then as a staff person to prepare this report, Wafa for her generosity in supporting it. And, it's been a privilege, a real honor and a privilege to be the director at Global Detroit. And we've really tried to listen to our staff on the ground. And so this idea of Trusted Connectors was really a team effort. And it's such an honor to have Mohit and Gracie and Raquel back with us today, because they're the ones who kind of created the work. And now we're seeing this work, take off nationally and be able to help spread it. So what we really wanted to do with this report was just build awareness for this need of investing in exactly what, these unofficial mayors, these folks who meet people where they're at, who go to their homes. And by doing so, we think we can really move the needle on equity and access to small business owners who typically don't have that access. Even though many of our small business programs are designed to assist underserved communities, too often they don't reach them. They don't think about the delivery mechanism to connect opportunity. It's that exactly what Raquel coined years ago. We are resource rich, opportunity rich, but connection poor. And so we are hopeful that this research will help other organizations, help other funders, help the government understand the importance of investing in these connection points, and create new programs, and really, hopefully a network to better study and communicate around best practices. The report sets forth the rationale is that there's a huge equity gap in our country. And this equity gap is it's not only exists in the small business arena, but frankly, in the delivery of the programs designed to help underserved small businesses. We know the wealth equity gap, the home ownership equity gap, where whites own 30% more likely to be homeowners than Black Americans, and more than Latinx, Native Americans, even Asian Americans. And we know that over 90% of the entrepreneurs of color have micro businesses with less than 10 employees. In fact, when you look at the share of companies, businesses that have a single employee and issue a W-2, African Americans only own 2.3% of those businesses, employer businesses in the country, despite being 14% of the population. It's not much better for the Latinx community, where they own 6% of those businesses, despite being 18% of the country, meaning 32% of this country, people of color, of those two race and ethnicities, own a mere 8%, 1/4 of what they should own. And that's just for employer businesses. But we also know that when we tried to help those businesses in the time of need, they were the businesses most hurt by the pandemic. A lot of retail businesses that people couldn't get to, the least able to weather those storms, right? And so we created the Paycheck Protection Program, billions of trillions of dollars that we put into the $800 billion that we put into these businesses. But because they didn't have pre-existing relationships with financial institutions, because there were information gaps and language gaps, because the algorithms used favored larger employees, because there was a delay in rolling out the program for sole proprietorships, and because of the documentation and eligibility requirements, we saw not only fewer loans to people of color, but disparities in loan forgiveness. And so those equities exist today. And what we do in the report is to talk about different models of using trusted connectors, right? So you've heard a lot about the Global Detroit model. I'm not going to get into that, but basically Global Detroit started in 2015, and we pay residents like Myra Valle, who's shown here on the right, and help her to go to the small business community in Southwest Detroit and Chadds-and-Condon, visit those businesses, and we give Myra the skills to understand the programs and opportunities. She's not running those programs. She's not making the loan decisions, but she knows enough to help people and get their applications in and raise the awareness of that opportunity. And she's known and trusted as a community leader in her own neighborhood. So that's our model. We mentioned before during Paul's opening remarks that Prosperous Detroit is based on the Neighborhood Development Center model, which has now become the Build From Within 4-pillar model. And the way the Build From Within members and Neighborhood Development Center and the Twin Cities use trusted connectors is by using community partner organizations. So when Prosperous or NDC do a small business training class for entrepreneurs, and they typically do 11 sessions plus 10 hours of one-on-one time for each entrepreneur they're training, those are held in the community by a community-based organization. That could be a business association, it could be a community development corporation, it could be a mosque, it could be a health center, it could be really any place trusted in the community that is culturally competent, linguistically accessible, and knows entrepreneurs. And then they pay that community organization to host that training. And together, in the NDC context, they jointly select the trainer and the participants in the program. And that community organization, that community partner, is the anchor by which NDC programs are offered throughout the whole Twin Cities region. And that Trusted Connector brings additional loan applicants, additional businesses needing technical assistance, and they really rely on it. Norris Research also obviously we work closely with the New Economy Initiative, and they have built on the Trusted Connector model as to one of their cornerstone programs. And in 2022, they invested $1.25 million into 12 different Trusted Connector organizations in Wayne County. And those include groups like an Arab American Women's Business Organization, Global Detroit, a whole Dream of Detroit, a whole host of organizations that are helping connect small businesses, entrepreneurs from the community to the array of other programs and opportunities that NEI supports. It's a really incredible model for funders to consider, to not just give money to support loans and grants and technical assistance, but to support that delivery system. And NEI is a leading philanthropic initiative to do so, and has a lot to teach other foundations across the country. The final model that we looked at was one that Noor uncovered in her research from the International Rescue Committee, the IRC, which plays a national role in helping resettle refugees and immigrants. And they were part of the SBA's Community Navigator pilot program. You may remember that huge grant program that came out. And their proposal, they're connecting with 20 local partners. The majority of those partners were selected for their deep community roots rather than necessarily their small business background. And what the IRC did is they onboarded those community organizations from across the country and trained them up in the small business area, knowing that they can't replicate those trusted connection relationships in those communities all across the country. And so they were connected. Sometimes those partners in this endeavor were connected to local CDFIs or national CDFIs to offer small business loans and supports. And what they saw is in their first year of the program, 2,300 small businesses were supported and given access to over 16,500 hours of technical assistance by funding those trusted connectors. So the next question that the report looks at is, how do you track and measure like who's doing what under trusted connectors? And the short answer is that really you can fit those measurements and that tracking to what you care about as a funder or somebody delivering a system. So if what you care about is how many loans that you're putting out the door, and are those loans getting to underserved communities, that's the way to track the trusted connectors. Did their connection points lead to those loans? And so what we see a lot is tracking the actual outreach to minority entrepreneurs. You know, how many people did they engage? How many businesses' doors did they knock on? Did they build awareness of programs? That can be done through pre and post surveys. The number of engagements they had, community events, one-on-one meetings, etc. And then also tracking the increased use of business services in terms of how many hours of technical assistance or business trainings people went to, or how many referrals were made. Other measures that are more downstream would be how many businesses were launched. You know, did they occupy commercial spaces? Were those formerly vacant? What was the business revenue? Those require a much deeper investment of time and resources to do that tracking. And then even getting into, you know, did personal wealth get increased? Was there community impact? You know, did they use their spaces did the businesses help use their spaces as community gathering points? But we think this is an area that's in need of additional research. And so with that, I'll send it back to you, Elena, for your next question.
So we only have about 5 minutes left on this panel. So with that, Noor, I'll let you decide what you think would be the most impactful piece of information to share. I think people are curious about what makes a good trusted connector, but also where can small business support organizations or funders or government entities begin with getting started in this work?
Yeah. Thanks, Elena, and thank you everyone for joining. I will say that this slide is one of my favorites because it really tells, I think Steve and I took pen to paper, but this really tells us what Mohit, Raquel, and Grace C were doing, right? Dr. Sadie Saar, Bridget Espinosa, there's so many folks who sat through interviews, and this is really their story. And it was largely being from the communities that they were serving, right? Whether they were living in the neighborhood or share ethnic or the same language as folks. Language access was also a huge one, down to the dialect, down to colloquially how people speak and the phrases and the statements that they make. Cultural connections was also huge, knowing how and where to engage community members, particularly when folks were working, like when he was really working during the peak of COVID. And so there was a lot of things for him to navigate. Steve mentioned a lot about active outreach, getting folks to go out. I think largely what this report does is tell us that putting out a grant or a loan that is expressing that they are for entrepreneurs of color is no longer enough, but we need to actively deploy people into communities that are supporting folks in accessing those grants, right? And we saw this with PPP, right? It was really catered towards entrepreneurs of color, but that did not support them in being able to navigate the disparities in access that did exist. I think another huge one was trust building. You can share the language, you can share the culture, but you need to be able to follow through when we make promises to entrepreneurs of color. When you need to stay with your commitment and be able to show that we are reliable and we are here to stay for the long run. And then one of the last ones comes from the Neighborhood Development Center's attributes of a community partner. As business service providers, state economic development agencies plan to work with trusted connectors. We need really good partners. I did freeze a little bit. We need to identify what partners need to be reliable, they need to be accountable, there needs to be shared accountability and goals, both on the trusted connector side, but also with the business service provider. Trusted connectors need to know that if they're making this referral, that there is going to be follow through with the business service provider to ensure that we are, again, building trust with the entrepreneurs. So you can go to the next slide, Alina. And so these are some of the best practices that folks were doing. Raquel was really leading on the door-to-door canvassing. They were canvassing commercial corridors. Entrepreneurs spend probably 10 plus hours in their businesses. That's going to be the place to find them. So that's definitely one of the biggest ones. WhatsApp was also huge. Several trusted connectors said that their communities communicate through WhatsApp. So several group chats were started around the pandemic to deploy information around different opportunities. Attending community meetings and spaces. I think Steve mentioned this, right? Wherever people are gathering, wherever there is congregation, that is where you want to be to talk to folks to understand their needs. And translating and remarketing materials is huge. Language is a huge accessibility issue. And so we want to make sure that people feel that they are empowered to apply to something because they have full understanding. And so that's also a huge one. And then next. So where to start? And so this is where I'm really excited because this is really the start of everything that can happen with this report. And so there is so many opportunities for further research and to continue to document the impact of trusted connectors. For folks who are interested in building and deploying this program, you know, there's great opportunity for peer-to-peer learning and networks and coalitions to continue to grow the trusted connector model. Funding, I want to see this grow. I want to see this grow in every way we can. And so that's also a huge portion. And then integrating the trusted connector model into small business support ecosystems in order for us to continue to champion this impact and to continue to see it grow and thrive. And I think that's where we can start. And so the next slide gives us for our many different audiences, for small business support organizations, state and local government and foundations, two of the biggest things that folks can do is to start accounting for trusted connectors in all grants and opportunities that they are deploying out, right? We want to make sure that in all funding for different small business grants and loans, there is funding considered for trusted connectors to help reach the entrepreneurs that we hope to. And then if another opportunity is to just fund trusted connectors directly, fund these models directly, fund the organizations who are great partners and actively reaching folks like we saw in IRC. Sometimes they don't need to be small business specific, but the trust and their connection to communities helps us yield that impact. And I think that there can be training that can be done. Neighborhood Development Center does that really well. They work with a plethora of partners who they train in the small business world. And then community-based organizations and advocates. Community-based organizations, you all can launch trusted connector programs yourself and help us continue to advocate for them. And that's also where advocates come in as well to help us champion this model. So that's my part. Yeah. And so this builds on like, where do we start? It was, where do we go from here? Where do we hope to see this grow? I really hope that folks feel empowered and interested in this model to deploy it in your own communities, deploy it across the state of Michigan, and together we can learn from one another, grow this. There's so many ways to evaluate the different metrics that Steve showed. This was really an exploratory analysis. This was the start to what I hope grows into a strategy that we can really document its impact, document how many people we are referring, we're getting access to, how much money, how much grant loans are we distributing out into communities, and leading to broader goals like wealth generations and job creation. So that makes me really excited. I hope we can continue these conversations, and that wraps up my part.
Okay, well, thank you, Nora, and for leading the research on this as part of your fulfillment for your master's in public policy. My guess is that your report and research were better than everybody
I
else.
think it was the most interesting, but
I'm guessing, not that I'm biased at all, maybe a little bit. Steve, just to wrap us up and round us out, any final thoughts or a final summation of what you see as next for this work?
We'll see where it takes us. And I'm gonna just make sure we stay on time so people get to the eclipse, but we'd love to see more research. We'd love to see a network built to better connect people who do trusted connector work. We'd love to see inquiries from anyone who we invited to this, whether they're a funder, a local unit of government, a small business provider, or a community activist. There are ways to plug into this. And we put the report in the chat, and we're open to follow up with wherever this takes us.
Okay, thank you. I will pass the mic back to Paul to introduce and moderate our third and final panel. Paul?
Thank you again, Dr. Jackson. And as the sun fades away, we will fade into the third panel, where I'm happy to talk about two of the constituencies that Nora discussed, which are the foundations and state government. So I have two great panelists I'm excited to welcome. I'll start with Wafa Dinero. Wafa is the Executive Director for the New Economy Initiatives, which we also refer to as NEI. And NEI is a project of the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. In her role, she leads the program and grant-making activities for entrepreneurship-based donors of the Community Foundation. She also cultivates public support for inclusive entrepreneurship and small business development related initiatives. So she's doing a lot of advocating and on behalf of small businesses within Wayne County and around the region at large. Welcome, Wafa.
Thank you.
Okay.
Happy to be here.
Great. Our other panelist, our next panelist is Amy Rencher. Amy is the Senior Vice President of the Small Businesses Department at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, or MEDC. We like abbreviations, so we will refer to as MEDC. In this role, she leads a portfolio of programs and strategy to serve the diverse needs of small businesses with resources for early stage to second stage companies around the state. In collaboration with hundreds of entrepreneurial ecosystem partners across the state, MEDC supports the launch, stabilization, and growth of thousands of businesses each year. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to jump right in. I'll start with Wafa. Wafa, I recognize and I know that NEI, the New Economy Initiative, has been a pioneer in developing this understanding of the importance of trusted connectors and amplifying their role within the small business support ecosystem. Can you tell me a little bit more about how NEI has been supporting and investing trusted connectors, and what's the investment approach for these very special organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. So we see grant making and ecosystem building for small businesses kind of as a three-legged stool. And the most obvious is technical assistance or practical assistance providers. Those are the people that are providing direct services, classes, accounting help directly to the business. The other kind of granting tier is capital providers, so the CDFIs that are providing loans and funding for these businesses. The kind of the tier that ties it all together is trusted connectors. These are really the organizations that are embedded in the communities, that are on the ground, that have the trust of the community, that are bridging that connection, bridging the gap between all of the resources that are available and the entrepreneurs. We found study after study after data point after data point finds that folks that get into the small business ecosystem in Southeast Michigan do very, very well. And it's the people that don't know about the resources that are available to them that we're trying to reach. And this is where Trusted Connectors really fill that gap and bridge that connection. There's a couple, like we see them as facilitating the access to resources, building trust within these, with the capital providers, as well as with the practical assistance providers. They provide culturally competent support, and they really enhance the outreach and support to the entrepreneurs. They're incredibly important, and they've really helped us reach a lot of our goals with getting entrepreneurs in under-resourced communities access to the resources that we're already building and funding and trying to get them in the door. So Trusted Connectors are just really critical to the work and to the overall ecosystem.
Great, thank you for that. I have so many more follow-up questions, but I will shift over to Amy before coming back to you. Amy, at the MEDC, how do you guys view Trusted Connectors? I know you take a statewide view of the ecosystem, so it's a bit of a broader perspective and touching different types of communities. So what do you see as the role of Trusted Connectors, and how has this view of the world shaped some of your initiatives, such as the support for the Entrepreneurial Hub grants and other initiatives that you have going on?
Certainly, there's a lot to unpack here. This has been, first and foremost, again, like so honored to be among this distinguished group of colleagues. These are folks that are trailblazers and leaders and strong advocates for underrepresented but powerful voices in our state. So thank you all. Just have to say that's really my pleasure to be here. And thank you to the leadership of Global Detroit and the RISE coalition for this work. So from the state's purview, I've had the benefit of working in Southeast Michigan for the better part of the last decade in this space. There's so much we can learn and amplify across the state from the great work done here in Southeast Michigan. And I'll say there's this wonderful in a way, urban-rural dichotomy here, right? Shared obstacles and opportunities in urban and rural communities across the state. And so this isn't just a Detroit thing or a Metro Detroit thing or Grand Rapids or Pontiac, what have you. There, in different ways, the need for these kinds of powerful connectors and advocates and liaisons across the state are the same. And so we take great interest at the MEDC in this work, in really building connectivity, access to resources. We are privy to all the stats, certainly from PPP and other small business grant resources during COVID, and how despite many great efforts over time, we still really failed to connect some of the folks who needed the resources the most. And so we're still learning from that. It's, I'll just speak candidly to all of our colleagues and stakeholders here on the call. And it's of great interest to us. So when we see leaders, like this group, like Global Detroit, the RISE Coalition, stepping up to make these recommendations, we take great heed. And we think there's a lot of opportunity here to further invest and strengthen and lengthen the investments many are making across the state, in public and private.
Thank you. We appreciate your support and look forward to further investments. So with I'd like to just turn it back over to you. And I guess just to contextualize, recognizing that the New Economy Initiative is a collaboration or collaborative amongst different philanthropic partners. I love to just sort of determine with this research at hand, how do you think NEI and other actors, maybe our philanthropic partners, will be able to leverage this to have more of a formalized approach to supporting the Trusted Connector networks?
We always love and appreciate data that says what we're doing is at least moving the needle in the right direction. So we always want to confirm or pivot if the research says we're doing something wrong. So the research is saying that trusted connectors are incredibly important to this work. And, we've doubled down on trusted connectors, and we want to continue to invest in trusted connectors because that work is so incredibly important. So as we, go back to our funders and say, like this, we want to continue this work, here's data to support it, here's the information. But also the New Economy Initiative is really kind of seen as a national model, and to take this research on trusted connectors and say, tell other places that are calling us about the work that we're doing and say, here's a study, here's how you implement it, here is why the trusted connectors are such a key component of this work. I mean, you can fund the practical assistance providers and the capital providers all day long, but without this key component of trusted connectors, the folks that are in the neighborhoods, in the communities, that are knocking on the businesses' doors, it doesn't work without the trusted connectors.
Thank you for that. Amy, again, it's really difficult to overstate how much innovation and leadership it takes to amplify a trusted connector network at the state level, while this is not, usually an area that's prioritized. As you have generated some support and interest in that and launched a few initiatives, I'm curious, how do you think that you'll be able to take the learnings into other spaces within the MEDC? I noticed that some of the convening smart zones have showed up at the table. So I guess it's like having this trusted connector network not only helps small businesses, but also ties in other marginalized communities to state resources. So curious to see what type of lateral plays can be made with this trusted connector network in hand, and maybe even outside the MEDC. Like, do you talk to other states or other economic development departments about how to leverage some of the things that you guys are doing and plan to do?
Well, I think the good news is that good news travels, and I was pleasantly surprised in coming to the MEDC. To folks here on the call, I've been with the state for just about a year and a half, and this concept was well socialized when I came here, and I had new colleagues reminding me what a trusted connector was. So again, kudos to this group and the power of the strong work here. So you mentioned, Paul, the Small Business Support Hub's funding opportunity, and we had another proposal on the table. Unfortunately, didn't make it through the powers that be that would have more directly funded at the time the trusted connectors, and I think there's still opportunity there. But we began to lay the foundation with this recent investment, which we leveraged $75 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds in small business support hubs across the state. Those were we sort of adapted a bit the hub and spoke model approach there, in that we have one main grantee, but a network of partners beneath them, or working alongside them, to make sure that we are culturally competent, that we're going deeper into communities of color, into more rural areas. We're providing access in ways that we haven't before. And so that's a pretty visible way from my office, in which we're beginning to show broader and stronger commitment in that way. And then I'll just say from an operations perspective, very proud of our team. I think I actually have some of our team members here on the webinar today, and colleagues within the organization that are offering office hours to our grantees. This is weekly office hours. American Rescue Plan Act funds, these are federal funds, they're not easy to use, and we pushed really hard to welcome new partners into our investment portfolio here at the MEDC, which means we had to go equally the next step further to make sure we extended our hand and walked alongside them so that we can ensure their success, not only this opportunity, but opportunities moving forward. So, we're working alongside ecosystem partners. We do not do this work alone. There are 20-some people at the MEDC that are focused on small business, and lots more people in the state of Michigan. So we're not trying to do this work or shoulder the work on our own, rather leverage the great work of a pretty extensive list of SMEs, subject matter experts across the state.
Well, I want to thank you both for your hard work, your commitment and leadership for this really important space that's often overlooked, but severely important. I was going to make a very corny joke about how bright the future is contrast to the eclipse, but I will spare that because I'm being told to finish it up, and I will turn it back over to Dr. Jackson. But thank you again sincerely for all your hard work.
Well, now is some time that we set aside for audience questions. We probably don't have a lot of time for open discussion as much as we hope, knowing that people want to get to the eclipse. But please feel free to raise your hand and we will call on you, or you could also put your question in the chat. Or even if there's a comment you'd like to share. Well, not seeing one, I'm going to put one out there. I'm wondering, Steve, given what you're hoping for comes out of the report and given some of the opportunities both Wafa and Amy mentioned, where do you see potential between collaboration between state initiatives and this local on the ground effort in terms of funding, in terms of coalition? Where do you see as an opportunity?
I mean, I think we're already seeing it, and it began a couple years ago with a meeting that the MEDC, the Leo department, and the lieutenant governor called together with the most diverse array of small business folks around the state that I've ever seen. And everybody was talking about this issue without necessarily having the language of trusted connectors. And so after the meeting, at the time, Chanel Scott Contreras over at ProsperUs and myself, asked the lieutenant governor and the Leo leadership if they mind if we had the group reconvene. And that's really how the Rise Michigan Coalition was formed. And while there are 6 folks that are part of the same grant, some of those other members of that coalition, whether it's Northern Initiatives or the West Michigan Hispanic Chamber, were able to pursue the Hub and Spoke grant directly. And so that coalition formed with NEI support. We were able to write some position papers and advocate with the MEDC. Amy was always eager to meet with us. And sometimes our requests, weren't the appropriate requests for SSBCI TA funds or other things, but I knew that, and she assured us, hey, but I want to make this work. I want to expand on this model. And so I think we're seeing the fruits of that labor, and hopefully we perform well under the grant that we do have together, and the other members of that coalition also perform to move the needle to those underserved communities, be it rural, immigrant, Latinx, Native American, African American. And then that Michigan really begins to, sort of blow its horn and say that, we are the national leader in expanding, moving the needle on access and equity. We are a very, very diverse state. And when we think about underserved communities, we're talking rural communities, and we're talking immigrant communities, and we're talking African American communities and Latinx communities, Asian American communities, and Native American communities. And so if we get it right here in Michigan, if we're able to show that this model can work in the great cities and in our rural communities and in our Native American communities and beyond, hopefully that story begins to spread. Because think about the Paycheck Protection Program. It was at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement and the terrible murders that we saw in 2020 and the years leading up to that. And everybody was pledging how much they wanted to do to really move the needle on race disparities. But we created an $800 billion small business program that repeated those inequities. At the moment, the greatest opportunity, greatest sympathy we had towards this issue. And so when people say that racism wasn't built in a day and it's not going to be dismantled overnight, it's going to happen through brick by brick, and the delivery system of these programs, small business programs, are important. I'm also really excited to see if this idea of trusted connectors can be expanded beyond just small business. Think of all the other things that we invest in as a community, whether it's workforce development, whether it's college education, whether it's asset building and financial literacy programs, savings programs, home ownership, all of those things. I think these models as somebody said, this is community organizing 101, just put into a two-word model of trusted connectors. And so I'm hopeful to see what that will create. And just really excited to see what's next.
Thanks for that. I look at who we have on the call today. We have representatives from government, we have funders, we have on the ground folks, and it looks like there's a lot of knowledge in this room. I am wondering then, where is the greatest gap? Where is the greatest knowledge gap or exposure gap? Who is it that we still need to convince? Who isn't already very deeply engaged in the partnership and fabric of this work? This is for any of the panelists. I'm wondering, who do we still need to convince? Because I'm convinced, and it seems like there's so many aspects of partners already on the call. Who's missing? Am I going to have to call on somebody?
I'll kind of, oh, go ahead.
Since I was in the corporate space, I think the private sector in regards to not just the banks, but a lot of the, if we speak in behalf of employers, or people who are interested in the population decline of not just here in Detroit, but in Michigan, how do you build thriving communities in which people want to live, work, and build their future? And is knowing that there are connectors in the community, like Let's Detroit program at the Chamber, that can help me set my future, right? And connecting me to the right people. But one thing I wanted to say before we leave is, for me, the most important thing about a trusted connector is that it can help us to curate solutions and interventions. And I think it's a twofold pipeline where it's macro and micro, because those are the people in the ground that is letting us know if things are working. Numbers are great, but storytelling is even better. And hearing directly from the trusted connectors how the programs and projects that we're creating is impacting the community, I think that's why we have the trusted connector as a coined word, because of the work that Beth and Mohit and Raquel were doing in the community. So I want to lift that up because it really helps us in the curation of intervention.
Thank you for that, Gracie. I do want to very quickly go to Raquel because I just saw her hand raised. Raquel?
I just want to echo what she just said. I think that we need to talk to funders, whoever's funding the work. They need to make the investment, and I think those funders need to talk to, municipalities and, what does your budget say? Because it really does require, we want to bring everyone into the circle. It's like 30%, 20% of the folks are just not going to enlist. And I have a tiny example. For example, we know we have funds right now, ARPA funds, I think, to change all of the lead pipes in Detroit because of Flint, right? And because we know, and it's an investment. And the city has been spending lots of money going spot changing pipes, like just going and doing one. In one neighborhood, Campbell and Christensen, like 9 or 10 were done at once because of a person who knocked doors. How much money did they save the city of Detroit? How much money, what is the health impact of that? And so the city needs to say, wow, how do we replicate that? How do we talk to this person and find that person in neighborhoods? And we already know they exist. Why not give them a stipend? Why not say, you saved us, we don't have to cart the machinery across the town or whatever, back and forth and delays. You saved us, I don't know, $20,000? We should pay you $500, or I don't, why not, and make that investment. We want for folks to do things for free, and we want to acknowledge and raise up what they're doing, and appreciate them, and be really honest about that. We need their partnership. not we're doing something for you. We need your partnership.
Okay, well, thank you for that wealth of knowledge and information. We are going to do our closing remarks, and then we're going to end with a few polls really quickly. So I'll turn this back over to Steve just to offer his closing thoughts, but also feel free, panelists, if anybody else has final thoughts they want to offer, jump on in. Steve?
Yeah, I wasn't sure, Wafa, if you had another comment, but if so, the mic is
No, they
easily-
covered it. Thank you.
Great. Well, I just want to thank everyone for coming. I want to make sure you have time to go to the eclipse, which I know is starting to happen. So with that, I'm going to cede over to the polls. We'll follow this up with slides from the recording, links to the report in our blog, and we're happy to take this show on the road, and we look forward to connecting with you on this topic in the coming weeks and months. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with our first poll. So our first question is, did this webinar increase your understanding of trusted connectors? And I think we'll give just a few seconds. Okay. Oh, I love this. I love this response already. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end this and then share the result. So we do have 100% folks said, yes, this webinar increased your understanding of trusted connectors. We love that. All right, I'm gonna go to the second poll, which is how confident are you that trusted connectors can move the needle on ensuring that small business resources, opportunities, and programs reach underserved communities and entrepreneurs? All right. So you have one person who said unsure, 6 folks said a good amount, and 14 folks said a tremendous amount. All right. Oh, I didn't share those results. There we go. There's that. And so we'll go to the third poll, which is, did you identify specific steps that you can take to deploy or utilize trusted connectors in your work? Wait for those responses to get in. Right, 17 folks said yes. Right, and then I will go to poll number 4. We're almost there. How likely are you to read the full Trusted Connectors report? Please read all of it. Read all of it. It was a labor of love.
I think the design was a labor of love. It was just love.
Okay, I'm gonna take it. Over 50% of folks said definitely. All right. Let's move on to our 5th poll. Ooh, would you participate in future meetings and/or discussions? Wow, this one was like fast. I love this. It was a beautiful 100% immediately. Okay. And then our 6th question is, would you or your organization be interested in expanding or adopting the program? We have another 100%. Here we go. And then the final poll is actually a short answer. So if you could put it in the chat, what was the most interesting part about this webinar? We'd love to download the chat and keep all of your responses. So everyone can just take a second and put those, and that'll be our wrap up.
Thank you, Nora. While folks are gathering their thoughts and putting their thoughts into the chat, we just want to let you know all this feedback is really important to us. We'll be using it as we continue to roll out this report and make adjustments to those aspects that have mostly, most resonated with folks. So thank you for that feedback. I want to thank all the panelists for coming today and giving of their time and their talent and their expertise. A special shout out to NEI for helping to fund this work and get this messaging out there and amplifying the work and the messaging around it. Definitely, once again, thank you to Build From Within Alliance. Thank you to Nora. This was a passion project. Helped her get over that next academic hurdle. She is now a master's degree holder. And thank you to Steve, who had the vision for embarking upon this. This was a great panel, and I think everybody's leaving here with a little more than they arrived with today. So thank you for that. Paul?
I echo your appreciation and your sentiments. Thank you, everybody. I think this was an amazing, well put together panel with a lot of really good insights. So look forward to what happens.